for any other questions from the floor. One over here, Michael.
Can I get you to autograph this book you wrote, Rocks and Minerals?
Yes, I can.
There you are. Bill wrote this in 2 weeks in 1960.
I have been a teacher. I've taught at, well, a lot of places. I taught at San Francisco State College. You may have heard of Stanford. I taught there. I taught for University of California. And, oh, okay. Yeah, okay. And one time, a woman came to my mother who lived in Pacific Grove and said, "Elmarie, Company Crosset and Dunlop have asked me to write a book about rocks and minerals. I don't know much about it, but I can write a book about it." She wrote books for children. But she said, "I'm not going to take it." And my mother said, "Why not?" She said, I write for hardcover books. I don't write for softcover books. Well, they published 2.5 million of these books. But she didn't know at that time. So she said, "Do you have any idea who somebody could do it?" Well, I was teaching at San Francisco State. And she said, "I'll ask my son." She said, "Bill, would you be interested in writing a book on rocks and minerals?" Well, I had a major in geology. I taught geology all over the West. So I said, "Well, that's a simple kind of thing." I took 2 weeks and wrote the book. And here I am today signing a copy. This was done in 1958. But it's still a wonderful thing. So I'll sign this to
eBay tonight.
Well, I signed it to Mike Wright, off of my right here. Okay, he took it.
I'd like to present you with our gratitude a copy of our book called Milestone. I describe to you through the book that we produced here in town for our centennial in 2002. So I hope you enjoy it.
I will, and thank you. Oh, that's wonderful. You can do with almost anything, without almost anything, but you can't do without books. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for coming down to see me.
Well, remember, I belong to this organization too.
He's a member.
Thank you.
I see that Suzette is back. Suzette is.
Well, I'm here with Bill Hyler at the Mountain View Historical Association on, this is, November 7th, 1910. Well, anyway, so Bill has been involved with many things, including one of these popular books, the How and Why series books for children. So, Rocks and Minerals, and you wrote this in 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, what happened was I was under a deadline. I was teaching at San Francisco State College, but the stuff that I wrote about, I knew backwards and forwards. I'd taken college classes to Death Valley, example, and examined the Yuba crater and gone through Titus Canyon and told them about this. And so this was pretty simple to do. The one thing that I had a little bit of issue with in the very beginning was children don't have any trouble with proper nouns. They can handle the biggest proper noun at all. My daughter, youngest daughter, was in the 3rd grade. She can read every word in there, but the proper nouns that I would have to teach her, she can learn those. So you don't worry about those proper nouns. It's the connecting words that sometimes you have to make sure that somebody 3rd year could read. And so she was a test pilot for this book.
I see.
And it worked very good. My mother helped me some on it because she was a reading specialist for elementary schools. taught reading all over everywhere. She had 32 schools she was a supervisor of in Monterey County.
She was the one that recommended that you write the book.
She was the one that talked to this. I'm sorry, I can't recall the name of the person who was asked by Grosset and Lena to write it, but she said, I don't write soft-cover books.
I believe the editor of this was what? Paul Blackwood?
Well, Paul Blackwood never even saw the book until it was published.
In fact, I think on some of the people involved with this, you had only one phone call with them.
Yeah, that's right.
Signed the proofread. That was your daughter and your mom.
Right. When I sent the first copy up, she called back and she said, who have you had to proofread it? And I said, well, no one. She says, it's been proofread. How do you know? Well, she says, I've never had a manuscript that came in like this. Somebody had to proofread it. And I said, no, I didn't give it to anybody to proofread. She couldn't believe that I could write it just like that I'm not a history and I'm not a language major, but I knew how to write. And when I came to a word that I was in question about, I'd call my daughter, and Joanie, I said, can you read this word? Yes, she'd read it, and I knew it could handle it. So that's why it was very successful. Several companies took this book and put the book out of a box, and then put a box inside the box with little compartments and filled it up with stones.
And this is what this illustration we're looking at right here.
Yes. So they sold this book with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. There's 20 stones in there. They had a lot more than that. But that's what put them all together, and that's one of the reasons it became so very successful, because you could buy it like this. Barnes & Noble took this book and made it into a hard copy, and it sold thousands in a hard copy.
So tell me something. Okay, here we are. I'm going back trying to ask things that happened 50 years ago, and you clearly remember every single one. But I think for the illustrator, you didn't really correspond with the illustrator much with that.
What I did is I put in the manuscript where I thought pictures could be and what they should be of. And he followed my suggestions.
Okay, I thought that was interesting, but it's also this is where you use a typewriter, because unlike nowadays with word processing, you delegate all the typesetting to the book publisher.
Well, that's right. I was in my house or my parents' home, and I was typing something up. The year is about 1935, or maybe 34. I can't remember the exact year. And my mother came home, and I was sitting there typing, watching the keys. She didn't say anything. The next day she came home, she had a typewriter, and she says, here's the typewriter you're going to use from now on. I'm putting this away. I looked at it. I said, I can't use that. It doesn't have anything on the keys. She went to a school and picked up a student's typewriter that doesn't have anything on the keys. You have to know where they are by feel, and that's what I learned to type on.
So in other words, I guess I have heard that before. These are typewriters designed so you can look at the handwritten notes and not have to go back and forth.
There's every key, they're QWERTY, Q-U-E-R-T-Y. That's the keyboard layout. And I learned to type with a QWERTY when I got in.
Well, Luis, we're videotaping Billy here, so we'll get you on the camera soon.
When I got into high school, I took 4 years of typing, and the first year I think I was typing between 50 and 60 words a minute. I typed 93 words a minute. One time I hit 102, but I was pretty lucky to hit 102.
But what about the mistake, the signal to noise ratio?
Well, you take the mistakes out, and then you count what you have left. You can't type if you if you type 50 words a minute and you've got 5 words mistake, you only type 45.
Okay, anyway, so going back to the book, what I thought was very interesting, even myself as an adult, to read through this and to find where you describe on rock formations based on if the, for example, lava, if it cooled quickly or slowly,
Yeah.
and then limestone, where it comes from shells, they fall to the ocean floor, and then millions of them they crush, and then etc. And then this is where you get limestone.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so. But I guess a lot of the stuff that you learned in geology, much of this is basic. But then again, you're able to take that 60+ credit and into a form.
Yeah, and the average person doesn't think about it. Over in the San Joaquin Valley, there's some areas where there's 7,000 feet of small animals. They're phytoplanktons. They're pelagic organisms that live in the ocean. They have a small shell, single shell. When they die, the shells fall on the ocean and build up. When you were there, here's the ocean floor, and here's these layers. Well, what happens with these layers, they come up like that.
Mister, why don't you use the Sharpie and I'll point it towards the camera. So,
Okay.
here's the Sharpie and I'll hold the...
So here's the bottom of the plateau of San Joaquin Valley. As they build up like this, because these are the coast ranges here, and they came up after the Sierras. So as they came up, all of the materials in here came up with them. So if you drill down this direction, you find these layers. But if you come up this one canyon that I know of, you can see all of them as you drive up the canyon. So you can see the Jacalitos Formation, the Santa Margarita Formation, Echegaray. We have all of these geological formations. That's what makes it so interesting.
Okay.
We have, I didn't find it, but a student of mine found a mosasaur. That's a giant lizard. It was about 14 feet in diameter, or in length. And what was interesting about it was the first mosasaur that anybody had found with a complete skeleton. And the importance was you could count the vertebrae from the place where it joins with the neck all the way to the tail, and you knew how many there were. Because you find a dinosaur, and you find part of him here, and part of him there, you don't know for sure how long was he. Are some pieces missing or not? You don't know. But so we found this mosasaur, and we put it together, and I was teaching at Monterey Peninsula College in 1958, and we exhibited it there, and it's still there, as far as I know. So it's an interesting thing. In the Coalinga region, they discovered a lot of oil. The first time they punched a drill down, they hit oil, and it flowed naturally for 7 months before they could stop it. It was the biggest oil find in California. They're still doing it in Lost Hills, and they still get that oil out.
This in the Taft area, Bakersfield as well.
Yes, it's all the same field. And I used to take classes down there and show them where these things first happened, where the first well was punched. They had sometimes a big house in one section and big powerful machinery in it and rods coming out from that house, and every 16 feet there was a rod sticking up that the rod slid in it, and these rods went out to other wells. So one big power plant would run dozens and dozens of pumps, pumping oil out of the ground.
Okay. So I guess based on geology, you run into all this stuff: rocks, there's minerals, there's oil, geological formations. That's
Right.
the whole thing. You know, I thought it was interesting going back to this book where you talked about this is the mineral, and a lot of people don't really. They think like the rocks you find laying on the ground.
Yeah.
But I thought it was also interesting when you mentioned about how someone can start their own rocks and mineral collection, and you recommended an 8 carton or a cigar box. This is 2010. Where is somebody going to find a cigar box?
Well, in those days they were pretty common. Not today.
Yeah.
But, you know, I can identify hundreds of minerals.
And in here we have like identification chart, so somebody can use this as actually a pretty good reference.
Yeah. With these, you can get a sight and you can see what it looks like. They don't always translate perfectly, but good enough for the average person can say, oh, I've got some fluorite. And if you use a black light, a lot of this stuff will shine at night. You know, it's fluorescent, iridescent. Interesting.
I guess going back what you were saying about the formations in the San Joaquin Valley. So let's say if children or whatever just look for rocks and minerals in their area, it depends on what part of the country they live in. They're going to have a different collection.
Exactly. When you're in Death Valley, you can go from one end of the valley down to the other end, and as you go down, you run into new formations every few miles. This was how you put a rock collection together. And the thing is not the collection itself, but the interest that you generate with a child who says, oh, I'd like to know what kind of rock is that. Well, God can recognize every kind of rock. A good geologist can probably identify almost all minerals, but the best geologists in the world cannot recognize all kinds of rocks.
That's because some rocks are formed with different minerals.
Well, they just have different names. You can use rhyolite. It's a reddish rock formed at a certain era, and it's rhyolite when you see it. But if you took that rhyolite out of there and threw it on the ground 5,000 miles, 2,000, 100 miles away, that person would pick it up and say, I've never seen anything like this before. I wonder where it came from. Thinking, well, it must be from float. You know, it came nearby 100 miles or 50 miles, but no, it hauled in.
So actually, that'd be a kind of a question. Do geologists have to, when they would identify certain minerals, to also consider could they have been artificially brought in, you know, from a quarry, and they put it on a train car, then a rock fall off the side alongside the tracks, and then it somehow got moved from one place to another?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. The field of geology has many different facets, you know. For instance, a friend of mine was studying silicoflagellates. And silicoflagellates are little tiny organisms, maybe 1/8 of an inch long with a little tail. And he proved that he could never find oil without finding silicoflagellates in the surrounding rock. He did his doctorate on it. So if you were looking for oil and you drilling a hole and you got up some of this rock that has silicoflagellates in it, keep looking, because you're going to find oil someplace there.
So I guess that's like they were saying, where all the oil are these organisms and dinosaurs from hundreds of millions of years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Well, a man named Alvarez, who was I think he was a psychology teacher. He was not a scientist. He was at the University of California. He is the one who postulated that probably some large object had struck the Caribbean and caused a large eruption and that spread around the earth and cooled the earth off and put a cloud up that caused the loss of food, which was what really killed all the dinosaurs. They all died in a decade or so. They didn't die out little by little. They all died about.
But actually going back to the dinosaurs and in the geology connection, you know, there was that theory, but it was for some time people were trying to find out. They would look at the sediments and they would find where the dinosaur era would abruptly end. It was a very sharp descent. So then I guess from then on they were always looking, okay, what made that sudden thing? And then
that's it. That's what happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, so going back, you mentioned about typewriters. We're changing the subject a little bit, but since I got you here, why the QWERTY keyboard? Why is the keyboard not in alphabetical order?
You know, I don't know, but I've been told that the keys you use most are the keys you can get with the two forefingers and the two middle fingers, and then the fourth finger the most. So those three fingers you have most dexterity with. Your little fingers you don't have much control over sometimes, but there are not very many keys that you hit with the little fingers. So I don't know whether that's true or not, but I think it probably is. I have seen several other keyboards, I don't know what they call them, that they claim if you learn them you can type faster. But I can't comment on it, I don't know for sure.
Okay. So anyway, then another thing, on your business card it says retired and trying to stay that way. And yet here you are, you've got this Pro Nikon camera. This is almost like is this like a full-time job for you at the same time you're doing lecturing?
Well, I have a good camera, better than this. I have a Nikon D3. You've seen it or heard of it?
No, I haven't. I'm not much of a camera on this.
Well, I can take this. And I just took a picture of David Wright, or of Wright. And I tell it in the camera what I took a picture of. When I get home, I open up the picture, and who is that? Oh, well, I turn the sound on, and it tells me who I took the picture of. It records my sound in the camera.
Okay, so I guess this works very. I took a few notes with that on my piece of paper from my video just to track what I was doing as I was experimenting with some of the auto iris techniques on that.
Right.
Well, anyway, okay, well, this is very interesting that you came out here to talk about this and also with the book. So with Nelson Bill Hyler here at the Mountain View Historical Association on November 7th, 2010. Okay, thank you, Bill.
My pleasure.